feel something different. So that's what I'm going to go with. I usually don't do that, but that's what I'm going to do. You know, the power of life and death lies in your tongue. And when you're a church person and you tell somebody, you're not going to make it, or I don't see a way for you out of that one. I mean, you're just pushing them down in the dirt. It's a testimony that Sister Hannah made it when people are telling her that. And I've had people tell me, I don't ever see that ever happening, you know, about certain things I want done in my life. Or, you know, I like to buy rent houses, and my Uncle Freddie, I think a lot of him when it comes to the ins and outs of that business. And if I told him a great deal that I had, and he said, I wouldn't buy it, I would probably try to go back out of the deal or whatever I had. So when a newcomer comes and talks to you, and you know they may be talking about their struggles, or they may be excited, or they may be this or that, and you just, well, I don't, you know, before you get to planning all that, I'd just see if you stick around very long. You know, we can be too negative and too down on people, and what would have happened if Jesus had been that way with Mary and Martha? You know, if he said, well, oh, you're saying I'm 4 days late, I guess there's no point in me being here. You know, and you want to talk about, if you think about your situation, is it any worse? Is it worse than your brother being put in a casket? That's, you know, what it would be now. I mean, is it more difficult to believe that, you know, Jesus, because we believe it, right? It's in the Bible, that he called Lazarus and told him to arise and called him out of that tomb. Is it harder to believe that than it is that, you know, maybe he could do something for your situation that you're going through? Now, I know it may seem dead, and it may seem like there's no hope, and that you're just going to have to throw your hands up and just wash yourself clean of it. But what if God moves? What if he does step in? What if he does tell you to arise and get out of that tomb? Or what about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Boy, that looked hopeless. That looked hopeless until they walked out. You know, they were in that fire. They weren't delivered when they were in the fire. God was in the process of doing it, but they weren't delivered from it until they stepped out of that fire and stepped a little bit away from it, because the guys that threw them in died and they weren't even in there. You know, you want to talk about hopeless situations. That's a hopeless situation. Or you want to talk about Daniel being thrown in the lion's den and having to use one as a pillow. You want to talk about a hopeless situation. You know, there's a game that I bought, and it's worst case scenario. And one of them is, you know, it's something about a lion or something. And that's always, you know, everybody's like, oh, that's terrible. Well, Daniel did it. Daniel did it a whole night, and he was their meal. You know, he was their ribeye they got thrown in the dinner plate. But, you know, instead of Daniel just saying, you know what, and trying to attack those lions and trying to fight them and kill them, you know, he didn't throw his hands up and say, I'm dead. He didn't do that. No, he knew what the word said. He knew what God had told him. He had confidence in what God had told him. And it seemed hopeless, but it wasn't hopeless to Daniel. It wasn't hopeless to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It looked it, but they had faith. And that's kind of what I was going to preach on a little bit is, you know, we can agree with what it says, but until we put action behind what it says, it's nothing. You know, you can agree with something all day long, but until you actually do it, you know, I can agree that exercising is going to help me lose weight. But until I start exercising, it's not going to do anything for me. So I can agree that what the Word says is true and that He can do it. But until I step out on that limb and try to exercise that faith, I'll never know. That's just like exercising. I could believe it would make me, you know, stronger and more fit. But until I start doing it, I'll never know. You know, that centurion, that Roman centurion. You want to talk about a man that he had faith, and he understood how God worked, because he wasn't a follower of Christ, but he did know about Christ, and he knew the power that, you know, Christ held. And whenever he asked or whenever, Jesus said, I'll come with you, he basically told him, I'm not worthy for you to come to my house, but he said, just give me the word and it'll be done. Because that's how he was used to living. When whoever his commander was told him to do something, he did it. And so he thought the same thing with Jesus. When Jesus says something, that's what's done. And that was, he had faith in Jesus. He may not have understood it all, but he understood that part and it worked. Because, what he was needing done got done right then. But, that was another hopeless. There's so many hopeless situations in the Bible that nowadays we would just have gave up on. Yeah, that's right. And that nothing would have ever gotten done. That situation would have never been solved. It would have never came back. But sometimes I think we don't give God enough time. When it all seems to fall apart, starts to fall apart, that's when we go, okay, I'm going to fix it now. And you may fix it, but you may not fix it how God was going to fix it. Let's say you have 100 cows or something, and you got a break in the fence, and you may save 20 of them with how you were going to fix it. Well, with the way God was going to do it, he may have gave you 200 more for free. I don't know. That was kind of a terrible example, but we think like, oh, I've got to keep what I've got. I've got to guard this, and this is all I've ever got, and that's all we focus on is what can I hold close to me when if we'll let God take care of it, and we don't worry about the outcome because we realize that our hope isn't in this life, and our hope isn't in the things of this life. Our hope and our faith is in Christ, and He's the ruler of this world. I know that the devil, he's running on a rampage, but this isn't his place. He's running loose on it for a little bit, and I've heard people say that the devil is the ruler of this world. He is not. He's not the ruler of mine and yours life. He's not the ruler of this world. Now, people are allowing him to do stuff through him or through them, and he's really done some terrible things. But if we will realize the power that's in us, that these hopeless situations that we just seem to give up on, and people, when we give up on people like Sister Hannah was talking about, you don't realize the destruction that has. One, it destroys that person, but it also destroys your faith. Because what if you are right? What if what you said discourages that person so bad that they do decide, you know what, I am going to quit? What did you put a feather in your cap? You were right, good for you. So you obviously don't have any faith. Your faith is in you because you're always right. You can't ever give God a chance for somebody that may not have been, raised on the straight and narrow like you, or may have went way more wild than you. You can't ever give that person a chance. But I'm glad it's not up to those people. It's it's up to Christ, and it's up to us to love those people in those hopeless situations. And if they do go back, it's up to us to still love them and still have faith, because he was 4 days late with Mary and Martha when it come to Lazarus. He didn't save Lazarus before he died. Lazarus was already dead, but he still raised Lazarus up, and they took the grave clothes off of him, and he was fine. So that person, and there's people that come to mind that I wish they would just get right with God. And it does almost feel like, you've prayed for 10 years now. What's the point of it? But there's always a point to it. That you may not understand the timing, but it's still it's good for us to be fervent in prayer and fasting for that, and believing for that, because you don't understand God's timing. I don't understand God's timing. I can be an impatient person. Sometimes I'm really patient, and sometimes I have zero patience whatsoever. And, I think that's one thing He's worked on me the last couple years, is just working on patience, being more patient, not having to rush into everything, because I'm bad about, I'll rush into something and I'll figure the details out later. And that's not bad in everything, but when we try to rush God's timing, it can throw everything off. And that's where we do it, and then we ask God to help us. This is terrible. Why is this happening? And the whole time God was saying, if you would just listen to me, and we don't have to bulldoze through everything. And that's something He's had to work with me, and I've had to learn it, through trial and error, just to trust Him and to lean on Him, and to not lean on myself. But those things that I'm talking about, praying for your lost loved ones and people that you wish would come back to Him. It's easy to want to rush Him, and He can't take over I guess He could, but He's not going to take over their free will.
That's right.
And make them do something. So we can't get in such a rush that we just throw in the towel in 2 weeks, because we've been praying, and we know we've been praying hard, and God's convicting them, and He is convicting them. If you're praying for them fervently, they have conviction somewhere that they need to get right. I truly believe that. I don't think that when you pray for somebody to get saved, and you're truly praying for it and you want them, I don't think God goes, yeah, I'll convict them 3 months from now. I think they feel that. He is constantly, as much as I want to see that person saved, He does too. That's His child. That's His heavenly child. It may be your physical father or mother or brother or sister, whatever it is, but those people, it's easy to give up hope on those people, and it's easy to just quit praying. And you don't even mean to, but nothing happens, so you start slipping in your prayers for them. Where you don't think about them, you don't bring it up to them, you don't call them every once in a while and just ask them how they're doing. But it's up to us to do our part, and God will work out the rest of the details, because those people, He is constantly reminding them that they need to make it right. And I've been there. I remember whenever I got saved that, I used to lay awake at night and no clue who it was praying for. It's probably my grandma and my grandpa, because they would ask me to come to church every time. And that's the reason why I finally got saved, is I got annoyed that they kept asking me. And I was like, sure, I'll go if you'll quit asking. So I did. But I remember probably months, and it wasn't every night, but it was a lot of nights. And I'm 15, 16 years old. I'm not, 10 years old crying at night. I would cry at night hoping that I wouldn't die, and that sounds silly when you get saved and you think it's like, just pray and ask for forgiveness and you'd be fine. But I remember literally crying at night, praying like, I don't want to die. Please don't let me die tonight. And then, I would wake up, and then I would go throughout my day and act like I never, that never happened, and I was never struggling with that. But then it would get back to night, and it was the same thing over and over and over for months, and it was God's just working on me and working on me. And, I wasn't, I guess I wasn't in the place for myself to get saved. I don't know what it was. I don't know why I wouldn't just bend to that, but He had to work it into me, to just mold me and to shape me and to push me. And it finally those prayers worked. And my grandma and my grandpa, they had told me that they had been praying and praying and praying that I would get right, and I wasn't a bad kid, and they knew that, but that doesn't matter. You'll go to hell whether you're a bad person or a good person if you're not saved. But that's just really what that's what I had on my heart when I walked up here is, we get down and discouraged if somebody will come to the piano about these situations in our lives and people that we want to see saved. We get discouraged because nothing happens when we want it to. But God doesn't work on our time. And that song, He's 4 days late. He's always on time. He was 4 days late. Mary and Martha, when He came up, they said, "You're late, He's dead." But Jesus just said, "Show me the grave." He didn't entertain that. He didn't say, "Okay, I'll turn around." He said, "Show me the grave." And then he told Lazarus to arise. There's always going to be hopeless situations in our lives, but we have to remember and we have to do our part to just push through those times when, and it's not always going to feel like it was in this service. where you just have that encouragement to just go through and push through those times. There's going to be times where you don't feel like it. And it does, whether you want to be honest with yourself or not, but there's going to be times where you do think, what's the point? There's times where I felt that way, where I thought, what's the point? Nothing's happening. But I just have to go back and remind myself that I'm sure glad my grandma and grandpa didn't think that way whenever I needed to be saved. They didn't think, what's the point? They were praying for me, and that was working on me. And they probably never knew it, because I didn't go tell anybody that, hey, I was, for nights on end, I couldn't hardly go to sleep because I was afraid of dying, lost. And I never told anybody that. They didn't know that. And odds are the people you're praying for aren't going to tell you that.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
They're not going to tell you that, like, man, I've been fearing about dying lost and going to hell, because if they told you that, you'd say, let's pray right now. And really and honestly, they probably don't want you to do that. I don't know why, but I just remember being there, and it's kind of, until you get saved, you truly get saved, it's almost embarrassing to admit that. But then you realize, like, well, I should have done that a long time ago. Everybody, I guess maybe not everybody, but most everybody I've talked to goes through something like that, where they were almost ashamed and they didn't want to do it, and then when they did it, they realized just how easy it was, and nobody really looked down on them. I've always thought about like backsliders. That's one of the biggest, I believe, one of the biggest hindrance to a backslider getting saved is the embarrassment of coming back. And I guess I've never had to do it, but I understand. I guess I think I understand, the thought process behind it. But when you read the book of Ruth, and you read where Naomi left, and she came back, sons were dead, daughter-in-law left her. She had one daughter-in-law with her that stuck with her. Husband died. She said, call me not Naomi, call me Mara, because the Almighty had dealt bitterly with me. And then you read through that book, and nobody ever called her that. Everybody always called her Naomi. She never got called Mara. Nobody ever put that stigma on her that was in that town that could have, because she left her in a bad time, because she didn't want to be associated with them. She wanted a place where there was plenty of food. She left them in a bad spot. But nobody ever called her that. Nobody ever, made her feel bad for it. And that's the way it is a lot with, I feel like with backsliders. If they would just realize the love that these people, that we as church people have for them. I'm not here to tell you can't make it. I'm not here to tell you that you'll just end up back out there in 2 months, or, we'll see how you act come Tuesday night when you've been out of church for a day or two. That's not for me to decide. I'm just here to love you, and I'm here to encourage you. I remember when I got saved, my grandpa pulled me aside, and he said, son, there's going to be times you mess up. He said, there'll be times where you don't feel worthy. He said, there'll be times where you think that, he said, the devil will tell you that it's not real, that, you're making it up, and this isn't real, and you might as well just go back to what you're doing. He said, but if you'll just push through them times, he said, you'll make it to the end. And, that helped me a lot, because there were times that, I didn't feel, like, why would he want to save me? And then there were times where I was going through a dry spell, and I thought, what even am I doing? But then I was always reminded of that somebody that had been through it 50 or 60 years, he went through it too. And I'm sure he still does. And if we'll just learn to push through those situations, y'all can play. Everybody can just come find them a place to pray tonight and just learn to push through those times.